The church bells of Graston rang slow and heavy that morning, as if they knew something was wrong. Folks gathered in whispers, their breath rising white in the Wyoming cold. At the front of the church stood Cole Merritt, tall, broad, and silent in a dark suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders. His jaw was tight, his hands stiff. He looked like a man walking to his own hanging. Beside him, the bride stood still, her face covered completely by a rough burlap sack tied at the neck with coarse rope. It wasn't lace or silk like other brides wore, just a feed sack, ugly and cruel. The town had come not to celebrate, but to stare. No one smiled. The preacher's voice trembled as he spoke the vows, skipping the kiss altogether. Behind them, the matron from the orphanage smiled with satisfaction, her eyes sharp as knives. She had arranged the marriage, she said, for the girl's own good. When the papers were signed, there was no music, no rice thrown, no cheer. Only the scrape of the pen and the creak of church pews as everyone leaned forward, waiting for the sack to come off. But it didn't. Cole never reached for it. The bride turned her head slightly, as if to listen for mercy that didn't come. Then the preacher said, "You may go now." And just like that, they were man and wife. Outside, the wind blew dry dust across the road. Cole helped her into the wagon, careful not to touch her more than he had to. The wooden wheels creaked as they rolled away from town, leaving behind the whispers. The burlap rubbed rough against her cheeks, and every breath tasted of old grain. Inside that sack was darkness, heat, and shame. Emmeline wanted to scream, but didn't dare. She remembered the matron's words from that morning. "Don't speak unless spoken to. He's blind. You'll be safe as long as you stay quiet." But Cole's knuckles were white on the reins, his eyes fixed on the trail. Blind? No. She saw him squint against the sun. He wasn't blind. The matron had lied again. Her stomach turned cold. She wasn't safe. They rode for hours through empty prairie. Not a word passed between them. The only sound were the squeak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on dirt. When they reached Merritt Ranch, the ranch hands froze at the sight. One man dropped his hat. Another muttered a curse under his breath. Cole helped her down, his touch firm but not cruel. He didn't speak, just led her into the house. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and horses. He guided her to a small bedroom and closed the door behind him. The silence was heavy. She could hear his boots pacing slowly across the floor, then stopping in front of her. His voice came low, steady and kind. "May I take it off?" Her heart raced. "Please don't be cruel," she whispered through the burlap. "I've had enough of that." The sound of rope sliding loose filled the air. He untied it carefully, almost reverently, and lifted the sack away. For a long moment, neither moved. Cole looked at her, really looked. The left side of her face was scarred deep, the skin puckered and pale, one eye sealed by burns. The other side was delicate, lovely in its sorrow. She stood trembling, waiting for disgust. Instead, he stepped closer. "Who did this to you?" he asked, voice breaking. Emmeline's lip trembled. "A girl at the orphanage. When I was 12. She said I was prettier than her. She threw acid." He closed his eyes for a moment, the muscles in his jaw twitching. "And they made you hide because of it. They said I'd frighten people. The matron said no one would ever want me. She told me you were blind." He took a breath, steady but angry. "They lied to both of us." She turned away, tears burning her cheeks. "You don't have to pretend, Mr. Merritt. I'll stay out of sight. You can go about your life." But his hand came to rest gently on her shoulder. "You'll never wear that sack again," he said quietly. "Not while I'm breathing." That night, neither of them slept. Cole gave her the bed and took the chair by the window, his rifle resting across his knees. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the real storm was inside both of them. Hers born of years of shame, his from anger at a world that could be so cruel. When dawn came, the chair was empty. Cole was gone. Emmeline sat up fast, heart pounding. The sack was gone too, burned maybe, but on the dresser lay 3 new dresses, soft colors, fine stitching. Beside them, a note in his strong hand. "You'll need these. I'll be back by nightfall." When she stepped into the kitchen, the staff stared. Some looked away quickly. Others couldn't help but stare at her scars. She stood tall anyway, chin lifted. For the first time in years, she could see the room without cloth in the way. It was blinding and strange and frightening. One woman whispered, "That's her, the sack bride." Emmeline's hands shook as she poured a cup of water. Cole had said she'd never wear it again, but he hadn't said the world would stop looking. She went to the window and saw dust rising on the far road. No sign of Cole. The ranch seemed too big, too quiet. She whispered to herself, "He said he'd be back." Outside, the sky was turning pink. Somewhere in the barn, a horse neighed softly. Inside, she stood alone, the morning light on her scarred face. The sack was gone, but the stares had only begun. Cole Merritt had vanished like a ghost at sunrise. Had he already regretted his promise? 2 weeks passed, and the house had fallen into a rhythm of quiet footsteps and unsaid words. Cole left before dawn each morning, the sound of his boots echoing down the hallway like a clock that never stopped ticking. By the time Emmeline awoke, he was gone, out on the range or in town, and he didn't return until after dark. Their meals were eaten in silence. Him at one end of the table, her at the other, with the crackle of the fire between them. The ranch hands tried not to stare, but pity was worse than cruelty. Mrs. Mara, the housekeeper, was kind in a way that hurt. Her soft tone only reminded Emmeline of how people spoke to the broken. Emmeline learned to move quietly through the house, her scar hidden beneath her hair, her heart tucked even deeper. Yet some nights, she watched through the window as Cole worked under the fading light, his shirt damp with sweat, his body strong and tired. She couldn't tell if the distance between them was mercy or punishment. One evening she returned from hanging laundry to find something new in her room, a mirror, polished and cruel, hanging on the wall. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned away sharply, anger and shame burning together. When Cole walked in, she faced him, trembling. "Why did you do that?" she demanded. "Why did you marry me if you can't bear to look at me?" His eyes widened, and for a moment he looked almost wounded. "I look at you every day," he said softly. "Then why don't you speak?" she shot back. "Because," he answered after a long silence, "I don't know what to say that won't sound like pity." Her voice rose, sharp and breaking. "I don't want your pity." His reply was low but firm, "And I don't want to give it, but I don't know what else I have." The air between them turned cold. He left without another word, and the slam of the door echoed like thunder. Days passed in that uneasy quiet, each one pressing heavier than the last. Then one night, when the house was empty of noise and her hands couldn't stay still, Emmeline wandered into the kitchen. She began to cook, something simple, something warm, just to remind herself she could still make something worth having. The smell of bread filled the air. Cole entered unexpectedly, rain on his shoulders, and stopped at the sight of her singing softly to herself. "My mother used to sing that," he said quietly, almost smiling. For the first time, she didn't flinch. "Did she asked. He nodded, sitting down across from her. In that dim kitchen light, he told her about his mother's kindness, her death when he was a boy, and how his father blamed him for it. She told him pieces of her own story: the jealous girl, the acid, the matron's cruelty, and the endless reminder that she'd never be wanted. Their words came slowly, cautiously, but something shifted. When his hand reached across the table to still hers, she didn't pull away. For the first time, his eyes met hers and didn't look past the scars. The next morning, the church bells rang through the valley. Cole appeared at the doorway, his hat in his hands. "We're going to church today," he said. Emmeline froze, the color draining from her face. "No," she whispered. "They'll stare." His voice was steady. "Let them. You're my wife." The words hung between them like a challenge and a promise all at once. Her fear was sharp, but his resolve was stronger. She nodded slowly, heart pounding. The sack was gone, but the judgment remained, and Cole Merritt was about to make a very public statement, one that would change everything. Sunday morning broke with the kind of light that made everything look sharper. Every fence post, every blade of grass, every glance that would soon cut like a knife. Emmeline stood in front of the mirror, hands trembling as she smoothed her plain blue dress, the one Cole had bought for her. Her hair was brushed and pinned low to one side, carefully framing her scars, though she knew there was no hiding them in daylight. Cole appeared behind her, freshly shaved, his shirt clean and crisp. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him she couldn't face those eyes again. But instead, she swallowed her fear and nodded. "As I'll ever be." The wagon ride into town was slow and silent, every turn of the wheel tightening the knot in her stomach. The horses' hooves echoed like a drumbeat, warning of what was coming. The closer they got, the more she could feel the weight of the stairs waiting for her. When they reached the church, the chatter outside died. People froze, halfway through greetings and gossip, their eyes fixed on the couple stepping down from the wagon. A mother pulled her child closer. A man nudged his friend and muttered something under his breath. Emmeline wanted to shrink, to disappear, but Cole's hand found hers, strong and sure. "Look straight ahead," he whispered. "Don't give them what they came for." Together, they walked down the center aisle of the church, past pews filled with open mouths and judging eyes. The whispers rippled behind them like wind through dry grass. When they reached the front, Cole didn't let go of her hand. He sat beside her, his back straight, his jaw tight. The preacher cleared his throat, fumbling his notes. His sermon that morning was about vanity, about the nature of beauty, about the ugliness that lives in hearts, not faces. It was meant as a lesson for the crowd, but every word felt like a spotlight on her. Emmeline kept her head bowed, her heart pounding, her hands still in Cole's. And when the final hymn was sung, she dared to look at him. He was looking back, not with pity, but with pride. Outside the church, the cold wind hit hard. Emmeline wanted to leave, to climb back into the wagon and vanish before the town could feast on their whispers, but fate had other plans. The matron from the orphanage stood at the bottom of the steps, her parasol shading a smirk that never reached her eyes. "Well," she said sweetly, "I see you've made the best of your situation, dear." Her gaze slid over Emmeline's face, the scar, the fear. Then she turned to Cole with fake concern. "I do hope she's adjusting. She's always been such a delicate soul." Cole's face hardened like stone. "You lied," he said evenly. "You told her I was blind." The matron blinked, pretending shock. "Oh, Mr. Merritt, and you told me she was eager to marry, that she understood. You lied to both of us. That's fraud." His voice carried, and people nearby stopped to listen. The matron's cheeks flushed crimson. "I did what was best for her," she hissed. "No," he said, stepping closer. "You did what was easiest for you. You wanted her gone." The crowd was growing, whispers turning into murmurs. Cole's voice rose just enough. "I could have this marriage annulled and sue the orphanage for deceit." The matron froze, panic flickering behind her eyes. "But I won't," Cole continued, his voice firm now, "because she's worth 100 of you." Silence followed. Even the wind stopped for a moment. Emmeline stood still, her heart hammering, the warmth of his words spreading through her like fire. Then, from the crowd, a gentle voice broke through, a woman, older, the preacher's wife. "Mrs. Merritt," she said kindly, "would you like to join the ladies' quilting circle next week?" The matron's mouth fell open, her authority cracking like dry glass. Emmeline stammered, "Yes. Thank you." The woman smiled softly. "Then we'll see you Sunday." The crowd shifted, the tide turning in an instant. The matron turned away, her dignity in tatters, muttering curses under her breath. Cole took Emmeline's hand again and guided her back to the wagon. The whispers followed, but they were different now, quieter, uncertain. On the ride home, The sky had turned golden, the world softer than it had been in years. Emmeline sat with her hands folded in her lap, unsure what to say. Finally, she found her voice. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Cole didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the road. "Yes, I did." "Why?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, the reins slack in his hands. "Because I'm tired of silence," he said. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care." Her breath caught. "What do you care about?" she whispered. He turned then, looking straight into her eyes. "You," he said simply. "I care about you." She couldn't breathe for a moment, the air thick with emotion she didn't understand. She turned her face away, blinking fast. They rode the rest of the way without words, but the silence between them wasn't the same. It was full of something new, something warm. That night, Emmeline wandered through the house long after everyone had gone to bed. She ended up in the storage room, where the smell of dust and old wood reminded her of the orphanage attic. She found a guitar leaning against the wall, its strings rusted but intact. She carried it into the parlor, wiped it clean, and sat down by the fire. Slowly, she began to play, her fingers remembering the songs she'd learned as a child when life still had music in it. The melody was soft and haunting, filling the house with a kind of peace it hadn't known before. Cole stood in the doorway, half in shadow, watching her. She didn't see him at first, but when she did, her hands froze. "Go on," he said softly. "Don't stop." She met his eyes, steady, warm, unflinching, and began to play again. The song spoke of loss, of healing, of love that grows in the cracks of broken things. When it ended, the silence that followed felt holy. Cole took a slow step forward, his face lit by firelight. "That was beautiful," he said. "You're beautiful." Her throat tightened. "Don't say that," she whispered. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said quietly. "I want to." For the first time, she didn't argue. She only nodded, her heart thudding against her ribs. Then came the sound, sharp and unexpected, a knock at the front door. Both of them froze. It was late, far too late for visitors. Cole crossed the room, hand brushing the gun at his hip, and opened the door. The wind blew in, cold and biting, carrying the smell of rain. On the porch stood a woman in a fine traveling coat, her hair perfect, her face painted with confidence. "Hello, Cole," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a long time." Emmeline's fingers went cold against the guitar strings. The stranger's gaze slid to her, assessing, cruel, amused. "You must be the wife," she said. "I'm Clara Whitmore." The name hit like a stone dropped into still water. Cole's shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Clara," he said flatly, "you shouldn't be here." Her smile widened. "Oh, I think I should." Behind her, the wind rattled the windows, promising a storm. Emmeline felt her stomach sink. She didn't know who this woman was, but she could tell she was trouble. The music that had filled the room only minutes ago was gone, leaving behind a heavy silence. Cole's past had come knocking. It was dressed in silk. The afternoon sun dipped low over the valley when Clara Whitmore stepped off her elegant carriage like she owned the earth beneath her heels. The ranch hands had stopped what they were doing, every head turning at the sight of her traveling dress, the shimmer of her jewelry, the air of a woman who had never known dust or want. "I'm looking for Cole Merritt," she said, her voice smooth as honey but twice as sticky. Emmeline stood in the doorway of the ranch house, apron still on, her heart quickening as the woman's gaze fell upon her. "Oh my," Clara whispered, lips curling in mock pity. "You must be the wife." Her eyes traveled over Emmeline's scar without shame, like she was appraising a damaged horse. "What happened to your face?" Emmeline froze, gripping the doorframe. Before she could answer, Clara tilted her head and added, "Where is Cole?" The question came out sharp, possessive. Cole appeared behind Emmeline, his voice cool and hard as stone. "Clara." That one word carried history, regret, and a warning. She turned, smiling like a snake. That's no way to greet your former fiancé. The world tilted. Emmeline's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the wood. Former fiancé. She couldn't move. Clara took a dainty step closer, her perfume filling the air. I heard you married, she said sweetly, though her eyes flashed cruel. I had to see it for myself. Cole's jaw tightened. You've seen enough. Oh, not nearly, she purred. I came to offer you a chance, Cole. A way out. I've had time to think, and, well, I'm willing to forgive the past. We could start again. Her hand almost brushed his sleeve. He stepped back as if burned. Get off my land, he said. You're choosing her? Clara's voice cracked. A scarred orphan over me. His answer came low and steady. I'm choosing peace. And you've never brought that. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Clara's face hardened, the mask slipping. You'll regret this, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. She turned to Emmeline, her words venomous. When he tires of charity work, don't say I didn't warn you. Then she stormed out, her carriage wheels spinning dust into the fading light. When the sound faded, the silence that followed was deafening. Emmeline's throat ached, but no sound came. Cole stood there, shoulders heavy, eyes dark with memories. I should have told you, he said. About her. She swallowed hard. You loved her once. His answer was quiet. I thought I did. She looked down, voice small. She was beautiful. She was, he said, but beauty's not the same as goodness. He turned toward the window, staring into the dusk. She loved my name, my land, not me. When the fire came, I learned what love really looks like. He hesitated. Do you want to see? She frowned. See what? He took off his shirt without a word. The lamplight caught the scars that crossed his back. Angry, uneven burns stretching from shoulder to hip. Emmeline gasped, stepping closer without meaning to. Cole. 3 years ago, he said quietly, the barn caught fire. I ran in to save the horses. Clara followed me in, panicked. I dragged her out. The roof fell before I could get clear. His voice faltered. She left me 2 days later. Said she couldn't marry someone damaged. His hand trembled slightly as he buttoned his shirt again. You're not the only one they called ugly. Emmeline's chest tightened, tears rising unbidden. She called you damaged? She whispered. And the town called you a monster. I guess we're both survivors of their lies. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe that's what drew me to you. I saw something familiar. She stepped forward before fear could stop her and placed her hand gently on his scarred back. He flinched but didn't pull away. It doesn't make you less, she said softly. It makes you human. He turned slowly, his gray eyes searching hers. And yours doesn't make you less either. His hand rose, hesitated, then cupped her cheek, the scarred side. She froze, breath caught between disbelief and need. I see you, Emmeline, he whispered. Her tears fell freely now. I see you too, Cole. The distance between them vanished as they leaned closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was soft, unsure, and painfully real. It wasn't the kiss of passion, but of two souls touching for the first time without shame. But just as warmth began to bloom between them, thunder cracked outside, shaking the walls. Cole jerked back, listening. The wind howled, and rain began to hammer the windows. The horses, he said, his instincts already moving. They'll panic in a storm like this. Emmeline grabbed her shawl. I'm coming with you. No, stay here. Don't argue, she said, voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. He hesitated, then nodded once. They rushed out into the night as lightning split the sky. The storm hit full force, rain slashing sideways, wind howling like a living thing. The yard was chaos, horses screaming, thunder rolling, mud sucking at their boots. Cole and the ranch hands fought to close the barn doors, their lanterns flickering in the gale. Emmeline ran to the paddock where a young colt had broken through the fence, thrashing in terror. Easy, boy, she called, her voice barely audible over the storm. She saw Cole climbing the broken fence, reaching for the colt's halter. Cole, she shouted, watch out. A rotted beam overhead groaned, the wind wrenching it loose. Cole ducked just in time as it swung down, but it didn't miss her. The beam caught her leg with a sickening crack, slamming her into the mud. Pain exploded through her body, white hot and blinding. "Cole!" she screamed, though it came out as a sob. He turned, eyes wide with horror, and sprinted to her. With a roar that came from somewhere deep and primal, he lifted the beam with his bare hands, muscles straining, veins standing out. "Hold on, Emmeline, hold on," he gasped. She was pale, shaking, the rain washing blood down her calf. He tore off his shirt, wrapped it tight around her leg, and lifted her into his arms. She clung to him weakly as he carried her through the storm, back to the house where Mrs. Mara and the ranch hands waited in alarm. "Get the doctor," he barked. "He can't come," someone shouted. "The bridge is out. Roads are flooded." Cole's jaw set hard. "Then I'll do it myself." He laid Emmeline on the kitchen table, her face ghost white, her breath shallow. "You're going to be all right," he said, though his own voice shook. He sterilized a needle in the fire, his hands trembling so badly that Mrs. Mara had to steady the lantern. Emmeline moaned as he began stitching the gash closed, every pull of the thread drawing another cry from her lips. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again, tears mixing with rain still dripping from his hair. When it was done, he lifted her gently and carried her to the bedroom. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling, "Don't let them put the sack back on." He brushed her hair away from her face, voice breaking. "Never. I swear, never again." He stayed by her side all night, holding her hand as the storm raged outside. When dawn came, the rain had stopped, but Cole hadn't moved. His eyes were bloodshot, his body exhausted, but he didn't care. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. The doctor arrived hours later, checked the wound, and looked at Cole in astonishment. "You did good work," he said quietly. "You saved her leg, maybe her life." Cole nodded numbly, his gaze never leaving her face. For days he barely slept, tending to her, changing bandages, spooning broth between her lips when she was too weak to eat. On the third day, her eyes opened fully, clear and aware. "You stayed," she whispered. "Where else would I be?" he answered, smiling tiredly. "You could have let me," she began, but he cut her off sharply. "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that." She fell silent, tears slipping down her cheeks. Something fragile and sacred grew between them in that small, quiet room. The kind of love that's built, not born. As she healed, she began to see him differently. He wasn't just the man who freed her from shame. He was the one who held her together when she broke. And as for Cole, he found peace in caring for her, in the steady rhythm of her breathing, in the soft squeeze of her hand when she stirred in her sleep. By the end of that week, when she smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for not leaving," he finally let himself exhale. "I told you I wouldn't," he murmured. Outside, the sky was clear again, washed clean by rain. Inside, something new had taken root, something neither of them dared name yet, but both could feel in the space between their hearts. The storm came like a warning from heaven, dark clouds curling over the horizon before anyone could blink, wind screaming through the valley as if it meant to tear the world apart. Cole had been mending the north fence when the first crack of thunder rolled across the hills, echoing through the barnyard. By the time he reached the ranch house, the sky was a furious gray and rain had begun to lash the windows. "Get the animals in," he shouted to his hands, his voice cutting through the wind. Emmeline appeared at the doorway, pale but standing on her still healing leg, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "You should stay inside," he said, pushing past her to grab his coat. "No," she answered firmly. "You'll need help." Before he could argue, she was already following him into the storm. The rain hit hard, stinging her skin like pebbles. She could barely see through the sheets of water, but she heard the horses screaming, the terrified snorts of animals that knew something she didn't. Lightning split the sky, and the world flashed white. The big barn loomed ahead, its doors banging wildly in the wind. Cole and two ranch hands fought to pull them closed, every muscle straining against the gale. "We've got a colt loose in the paddock," one shouted. Cole swore under his breath. "Get the others inside." "I'll get him." Emmeline turned toward him, hair plastered to her face. "I'm coming too." "No," he barked. "Stay put." But she didn't listen. She ran after him, her skirts heavy with rain, boots sinking into the mud with every step. The colt was trapped near the far fence, thrashing in panic, its eyes rolling white. Cole climbed the gate, voice low and steady as he approached the trembling animal. "Easy, boy, easy." Emmeline could barely hear him over the roar of the storm. Then, as he reached for the colt's halter, a sound cracked through the night, a groan, deep and deadly. She looked up. A rotted beam overhead was splitting under the weight of the rain. "Cole!" she screamed, but it was too late. The beam broke loose, swinging down like a club. Cole dove out of the way, but the other end caught her full on the leg, slamming her into the mud. Pain shot through her like fire. She couldn't move, could barely breathe. Cole's heart nearly stopped at the sight of her crumpled body. "Emmeline!" he roared, racing to her. Rain poured down his face as he shoved at the beam, his muscles straining. It wouldn't budge. "Help me!" he yelled, and two men came running, their hands slipping on the wet wood. With a roar born of pure terror, Cole lifted the beam just enough to drag her free. Blood poured from her leg, soaking through her skirt. "Stay with me," he gasped, tearing off his shirt to wrap the wound. Her face was white as chalk, her lips trembling. "Cole," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Don't you close your eyes," he said, hoisting her into his arms. He carried her through the downpour, every step a prayer, the storm raging around them like it wanted to swallow them both. By the time he reached the ranch house, he was soaked to the bone. Mrs. Mara opened the door, gasping at the sight. "Dear Lord, get towels." "Boil water," he ordered, laying Emmeline on the kitchen table. "Where's the doctor?" "He can't get through. The bridge is gone." Cole clenched his teeth, his hands shaking. "Then I'll do it myself." He sterilized a needle in the fire, thread shaking between his fingers as lightning flashed again and again. Emmeline groaned as he began to stitch the wound, her cries piercing through the howling wind. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again. "Emmeline." When it was over, he lifted her gently, carrying her to their room. "You'll be fine," he murmured, though he didn't believe it. She was feverish by morning, her skin hot to the touch, sweat beading on her forehead. He sat by her bedside all night, holding her hand, whispering to her even when she couldn't answer. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "You'll never be alone again." Outside, the storm finally began to fade, but Cole didn't leave her side. When the doctor arrived the next day, he found Cole slumped in the chair, exhausted, his head resting on the bed. "You saved her leg," the doctor said after examining the stitches. "You saved her life." Cole didn't answer, just brushed a damp curl from Emmeline's forehead. For 3 days, he tended her himself, feeding her broth, cooling her fever with damp cloths, whispering words she was too weak to hear. When her eyes finally fluttered open on the 4th morning, he was there. "You stayed," she murmured weakly. He smiled faintly. "Where else would I go?" "You could have left," she said. "I gave you reason." He shook his head. "You don't get rid of me that easy." Tears filled her eyes, slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said. "Just get better." She did slowly. The fever broke, the wound began to close, and the color returned to her face. Each day, she grew stronger, and each night, he read aloud to her from an old Bible, his voice steady and low. Sometimes she'd drift off mid-verse, comforted by the sound. Other times, she'd lie awake, watching him under lamplight, seeing how tired he looked and how much he cared. A week later, she tried to stand. "Careful," he said, his arm immediately around her waist. "I've got it," she said, though she leaned against him more than she'd admit. He helped her to a chair by the window, the sunlight soft and golden on her face. "Feels like a different world," she whispered. "Maybe it is," he said quietly. They sat like that for a while, not needing words. That evening, when the fire was low and the house quiet, she asked softly, "Why do you look at me like that?" He frowned. "Like what?" "Like I'm beautiful." The words came out so small, she almost didn't recognize her own voice. He set down his book and leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. "Because you are," he said simply. "You always have been." She blinked, tears welling again. "Even with this?" she asked, touching her scar. He reached over, catching her hand in his. "Especially with that. It's proof you survived." She shook her head, sobbing quietly. "All my life, they told me I was ugly, that I'd never be loved, that I'd never be enough." He squeezed her hand tighter. "They were wrong." "How can you say that?" "Because I see the truth," he said softly. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. You think these scars make you less? They make you more. They make you real." She broke thin, covering her face with her hands. He pulled her close, her tears soaking his shirt. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let it out." For the first time, she let herself cry for everything. The years in the orphanage, the cruelty, the sack, the shame. When the sobs finally stopped, she looked up at him, her face raw and open. "Why me, Cole? Why did you marry me?" He hesitated, brushing a thumb across her cheek. "Because I thought I was saving you," he said. "But now I know you were saving me." She laughed softly through her tears. "You don't need saving." "We all do," he said. "I just didn't know mine would come wearing a sack." She laughed again, the sound fragile but real. He smiled. "You have no idea how much you mean to me." "Then tell me," she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "Not yet," he said. "Soon." She didn't push. She just leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder as the night stretched quiet around them. The storm had taken so much, but it had left something too, something new and strong and fragile all at once. Days turned into weeks, and by the time she could walk again, spring had begun to bloom across the plains. Cole worked the fields with a new lightness in his step. Emmeline helped Mrs. Mara in the kitchen, humming while she worked. One afternoon, Cole came in with wildflowers in his hand. "For you," he said shyly, setting them on the table. "They're weeds," she said, smiling. "Then I guess I'm a weed man," he answered, and she laughed. He loved that sound. That night, as she drifted to sleep, she thought about how far they'd come, from a sack and silence to a home filled with warmth. She had believed love was something meant for other people, but Cole Merritt had rewritten that truth. She dreamed of him that night, of his hands, his eyes, his voice, and when she woke, she realized she was no longer afraid of being seen. The scars would never vanish, but neither would his love. He had saved her in the storm, but he was about to do something even greater. He was about to speak the words that would change everything. The days after the storm passed like the slow turning of a page, quiet and full of sunlight. Spring had arrived early that year, washing the Wyoming hills in green and gold. And though the world outside looked new, the house still held a softness born from what they'd survived. Emmeline could walk now, though she kept a cane nearby, carved by Cole himself from the branch of a cottonwood tree that had fallen during the storm. He said the wood was strong, like her. She'd smiled when he said it, shy but glowing, because she knew he meant it. Every step still hurt a little, but she moved with quiet pride, her limp a badge of the life she'd fought to keep. Cole stayed close those days, watching her the way a man watches the sun rise, steady, reverent, as though he couldn't quite believe it was real. Sometimes she'd catch him staring and blush, but she no longer turned away. They'd fallen into a rhythm again, but this time, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, shared like two hearts breathing the same air. Still, there were things unsaid, words that hovered just beyond the edge of courage. She could feel them every time he brushed a loose strand of hair from her face or lingered too long in the doorway before leaving for the fields. One evening, just before sunset, she found him on the porch, sitting with his boots propped on the rail, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. The sky burned pink and orange over the valley, the wind carrying the smell of lilacs from the side garden. She joined him quietly, leaning on the railing. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said after a long pause. "Doing what?" he asked, not looking at her. "Taking care of me," she said softly. "I'm strong enough now. You don't have to stay tied to someone like me." He turned in, his gray eyes steady. "Someone like you?" She looked away, fingers tightening on the railing. "You know what I mean?" He stood slowly, stepping closer. "No, I don't. You tell me what you mean." Her throat tightened. "You could have a whole life, Cole. Someone whole. Someone without scars." He reached out and gently turned her face toward his. "Emmeline," he said quietly, "I don't want someone else. I want you." Her breath caught, the world narrowing to just his voice. "Why?" she whispered. He took a long breath, his words coming like a confession. "Because I love you." She froze, the sound of those words crashing over her like thunder. He didn't look away. "I love you," he repeated. "I love the way you fight, the way you laugh, the way you see the world even after it tried to break you. You think those scars make you ugly, but they make you a survivor. You think I see damage, but I see strength. Every time I look at you, I see someone who walked through hell and still chose kindness. How could I not love that?" Her eyes filled with tears, the kind that didn't sting but healed. "You mean that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Every word." He smiled faintly. "Truth is, I fell in love the night I took that sack off. I just didn't know if I was allowed to." She let out a choked laugh, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, Cole," she whispered, stepping closer. "You are." Their lips met, slow and deep, a kiss that felt like home, like the end of one story and the start of another. There was no fear left between them, only the steady rhythm of hearts that finally beat together. When they pulled apart, the last light of sunset bathed them in gold. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady sound of his heart. For the first time in her life, she believed she was wanted. The next morning, he was already gone when she woke, but there was a note on the table. "Meet me outside after breakfast." Or something nice. She frowned but did as told, slipping into her light blue dress, the one that always made her feel gentler somehow. When she stepped outside, the ranch yard was quiet, the air fresh after the night's rain. Cole stood near the corral, hat in hand, a strange look on his face, something nervous and excited all at once. "What's this?" she asked. "A surprise," he said, offering his arm. He led her down the trail that curved behind the barn, past the field where wildflowers now bloomed, until they reached the clearing by the creek. There, under the open sky, was a small arch of wild prairie flowers and ribbons. Emmeline gasped. "Cole, what is this?" He smiled softly. "It's where I want to marry you again. For real this time." Her mouth fell open. "What?" "We were married in shame," he said gently. "I want to do it again, in celebration. You're showing your face, me say my vows like I mean them. No lies, no sack, just us." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "You can't mean that." "The whole town, the whole town," he said firmly. "Let them come. Let them see what I see." Tears blurred her vision. "Cole, I can't." "You can," he said. "And you will, if you want this as much as I do." She swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. "I do." He smiled, relief breaking across his face. Then it settled. Over the next week, the ranch buzzed with quiet excitement. Mrs. Mara helped with the dress, simple white cotton trimmed with lace. Emmeline refused a veil. She wanted the wind on her face and the world to see her exactly as she was. She wore her hair up for the first time, leaving the scar exposed. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a monster anymore. She saw a woman who had lived. Invitations were sent across town, handwritten by Cole himself. Some folks came out of curiosity, others out of guilt, and a few because they truly cared. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Emmeline stood inside the house, hands trembling slightly as she fastened the last button on her dress. Mrs. Mara stepped back, tears in her eyes. "You look beautiful," she said. "You really do." Emmeline smiled, her heart full. "Thank you." Outside, she could hear the hum of wagons arriving, the chatter of voices, the sound of fiddle tuning. The town had gathered, men in their Sunday coats, women in their bonnets, children running barefoot through the grass. When the time came, she stepped out of the house, the sunlight dazzling her eyes. The murmurs began immediately, a mix of surprise and admiration. She walked slowly toward the clearing, every step light but sure. There was no sack, no shame, no hiding. Her scars shone in the sunlight like the map of a battle survived. And there, at the arch of wildflowers, stood Cole, waiting with a smile that reached his eyes. The preacher began, his words carried by the breeze. "We gather here today under God's sky to witness the joining of Cole Merritt and Emmeline Grace Merritt in holy matrimony." Cole reached for her hands, holding them tightly in his. "We've done this before," he whispered with a grin. "Not like this," she replied softly. They spoke their vows, written in their own hands. Emmeline's voice trembled but held steady. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You loved me when I believed I was unlovable. I promised to show my face, speak my truth, and never hide again." Cole's voice was low and steady. "I thought I knew what beauty was until I met you. I thought I knew what strength was until I watched you survive. I promise to remind you every day that you are seen, valued, and cherished." The preacher smiled. "By the law of God in this community, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Cole didn't hesitate. He leaned in, kissed her softly at first, then deeper, their tears mingling. The crowd erupted in applause, real, heartfelt applause. Even some who had once whispered behind their backs wiped at their eyes. Clara Whitmore was not among them. She'd left town weeks ago, her pride too brittle to face what she'd lost. When the ceremony ended, Emmeline turned to the crowd, her heart pounding but light. For the first time in her life, she met their eyes without fear. People smiled, and it was genuine. The preacher's wife came forward, pressing her hands around Emmeline's. "You did it, dear," she whispered. "You made them see." Later, as twilight fell, the celebration continued on the ranch. There was music and laughter, food and dancing. Cole lifted her into his arms and spun her once, ignoring her protests about her leg. "You'll hurt yourself," she laughed. "Not a chance," he said. "I'm holding you, aren't I?" She laughed again, the sound bright as a bell. When the last song ended and the guests had gone, they sat on the porch under a blanket, the stars scattered thick across the night sky. The air was cool and smelled of grass and pine. Emmeline leaned against Cole, her head resting on his shoulder. "I used to think the sack was the worst thing that ever happened to me," she said quietly. He turned his head slightly. "And now?" She smiled softly. "Now I think it brought me to you." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "They said you were too ugly to marry," he murmured. She laughed gently. "They were wrong." He kissed the top of her head. They were wrong about everything. They sat in silence then, listening to the crickets and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. Behind them, the burned remains of the old sack lay in the fire pit, ashes glowing faintly in the dark. It had been burned that afternoon, at her request, as a symbol that the past no longer owned her. The fire had flared high, devouring the burlap quickly, leaving nothing but light. She'd watched the smoke drift upward, her hand in Cole's, feeling free in a way she'd never known. Now, as she watched the stars, she thought of all that had happened. The orphanage, the lies, the cruelty, the storm, and realized that it all led here to this porch, to this peace. "Cole," she whispered, Do you ever wonder what comes next?" He smiled in the dark. Tomorrow, we fix that fence in the north field." She laughed. "That's not what I meant." "I know," he said softly. "I think what comes next is life. Ordinary, beautiful life." She nodded, her heart swelling. "That sounds perfect." He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles over her knuckles. "You know," he said, "the first time I saw you, I thought my life was over. But they've forced me into something cruel." She smiled. "And now I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me." She leaned up and kissed him again, slow and sure. The stars wheeled overhead, the ranch bathed in silver light. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied softly, the world at peace. And as the night deepened, a gentle voice seemed to whisper through the air, not from heaven or earth, but from the heart of the story itself. The sack was burned that day, but the love was just beginning.